Welcome back, everyone, to the deep dive, where we like
Uh,
to, really kind of unpack some of these, these big topics. And today we're going to be talking about Kamala Harris and,
Oh, yeah.
what kind of impact she's had on American politics. And of course, she's making another run for the presidency. So we're going to be talking about that too.
Yeah, her journey is really remarkable when you think about it, from San Francisco district attorney all the way to, potentially the Oval Office.
Yeah,
It's a really inspiring story in a lot of ways, but also uh, there's been some controversy along the way.
right. And that's what we're going to be diving into today, right?
Yeah.
So we're using a variety of sources.
Sure.
We've got her official campaign website. We've got some biographical information. And we've also got some opinion pieces from various sources that don't always paint her in the most flattering light.
Exactly. And I think that's important to get, a balanced perspective,
Right.
right? You don't want to just get the PR version of the story.
Exactly. Yeah.
We want to look at the good, the bad, and the ugly.
That's right. That's what we do here at the Deep Dive.
That's right.
So let's start at the beginning. Her early career in San Francisco as district attorney. Her campaign website talks a lot about this program she started called Back on Track.
Yeah.
And it sounds like it was pretty innovative for its time.
It was really focused on trying to reduce recidivism
Right.
among nonviolent drug offenders.
So instead of just locking people up,
Exactly.
they were trying to give them a chance to get back on their feet.
Exactly. Give them job training education,
Right.
help them reintegrate into society.
Support system.
Exactly.
So that sounds pretty good in theory.
It does. And there were definitely some success stories that came out of that program.
But then you hear about things like her prosecuting parents of truant kids.
Oh, yeah.
And
That was definitely controversial.
yeah, it seems a little bit at odds with this idea of giving people second chances.
It does. And that was one of the criticisms that she faced even early on in her career.
Right. So you see this tension between
Right.
this kind of tough on crime approach
Right.
and this
Mhm.
more rehabilitative, reform minded approach.
Exactly. And that tension is something that has kind of followed her throughout her career.
Right. It's a thread we're going to be seeing.
Yes, definitely.
So her work in San Francisco obviously got her noticed. Um, she was elected Attorney General of California,
Right.
another historic
Still a huge step.
first woman, first black woman, first South Asian American woman to hold that position in California.
It's a very powerful, statement, and it's a very powerful achievement for her.
And during her time as Attorney General, she went after some pretty big corporations.
She did. She went after, banks like JP Morgan Chase.
Right.
During the housing crisis, she was really focused on protecting homeowners.
Consumer protection seems like a big theme.
Definitely a big theme in her career.
Students, seniors,
And absolutely.
trying to protect people from fraud and abuse.
She saw herself as, a fighter for the little guy.
But then there's this other side of her record as Attorney General that's a little bit more controversial,
Right.
right? Particularly her approach to criminal justice.
Right. And this is where some of the most, intense criticisms of her come from.
Yeah.
People who say that she was too slow to embrace reforms, that could have addressed systemic bias in the justice system.
That she was too focused on punishment
Exactly.
and not enough on rehabilitation.
Exactly. And there were cases where she was criticized for upholding wrongful convictions,
Right.
for not doing enough to, exonerate people who had been unjustly imprisoned.
So it's a complicated legacy.
Very complicated, yeah.
On the one hand, you have this image of her as a fighter for the underdog,
Right.
taking on big corporations.
Protecting the vulnerable.
But on the other hand, you have these accusations that she was part of a system that was perpetuating injustice.
Right.
And that's a tough thing to reconcile.
It is, and it's important to, remember the context of the time. Tough on crime policies were very popular back then,
Right.
and she was operating within that system.
But it definitely raises questions about her commitment to true criminal justice reform.
It does, and those questions are something that, have followed her throughout her career.
And they came up again when she became a senator, right?
Absolutely.
Because shortly after she got to the Senate, she was thrust onto the national stage,
Yes.
grilling Trump administration officials.
Those were some memorable moments.
Yeah, she became known for her sharp questioning style,
She definitely didn't hold back.
and she became a vocal advocate for progressive causes.
Right.
Gun control, immigration reform, health care.
All the big issues.
But did that translate into actual policy changes?
That's the question, right?
That's what we're going to be talking about.
Because, you can be a great advocate, you can be a great voice, but can you actually get things done?
Can you move the needle?
Can you make a difference?
And that's what we're going to be exploring as we continue this deep dive.
We'll be right back. All right, so we're back and we're talking about Kamala Harris. And, we left off with her time in the Senate and how she really kind of became this national figure.
Right.
But, the next chapter in her story, of course, is becoming vice president.
Yeah, historic moment.
Historic moment. Absolutely. The first woman, the first Black woman, the first South Asian American woman to hold that office.
Incredible.
And, one of the big issues that she was tasked with tackling right out of the gate was immigration.
Oh, yeah. That's a hot button issue.
Always has been, always will be.
And it's not just about border security, right? It's about
Right.
trying to address the root causes of migration.
Exactly. Why are people fleeing their homes in the first place? What are the push factors?
Poverty, violence,
Lack of opportunity, all of those things.
climate change even.
Absolutely. And so she was tasked with, trying to figure out how to address those issues in Central America.
And she took a more diplomatic approach, right? Working with leaders in Guatemala and Mexico.
Exactly. Trying to build partnerships.
Right.
Trying to, encourage investment in the region.
Her website talks about this partnership for Central America,
Yeah.
which has brought in billions of dollars in private investment.
And the idea is, if you can improve the economic conditions in those countries,
Right.
if you can create opportunities for people.
Then they'll be less likely to leave.
Exactly.
But of course, that's a long-term strategy.
Very long term.
And not everyone's patient enough for that.
Right. Her critics argue that those efforts haven't really produced results.
Right. That the situation at the border hasn't really improved.
And they say, she should have focused more on enforcement.
Right. So it's this classic debate, right? Between those who want to focus on the root causes
Right.
and those who want to focus on border security.
And it's a tough needle to thread.
Absolutely.
And, immigration wasn't the only issue she was dealing with.
Right. She was also involved in foreign policy,
Absolutely.
navigating all sorts of complex relationships with other countries.
This was during a time of, heightened global tensions.
Right. The war in Ukraine.
The rise of China.
So a lot on her plate.
A lot on her plate. And, she faced criticisms in that arena as well.
Like what?
Some people felt that she wasn't assertive enough on the world stage,
Right.
that she didn't have the experience or the gravitas to really command respect.
Andrew.
Others criticized her handling of specific situations.
Like the withdrawal from Afghanistan.
Exactly, which was a very chaotic and messy situation.
So even as vice president, she wasn't immune to criticism.
Nobody is.
But it seems like those criticisms often kind of come back to this question of her leadership style.
Right. Is she tough enough? Is she experienced enough? Is she ready for the big leagues?
And I think it's interesting to think about, whether those critiques are fair.
Right.
Or whether they're influenced by, the fact that she's a woman.
Absolutely.
That she's a woman of color.
There's definitely a double standard there.
So let's shift gears a little bit and talk about some of those domestic issues that really impact everyday Americans, like healthcare and education.
Big issues.
Her website talks a lot about her commitment to affordable healthcare.
Right. She's a big supporter of the Affordable Care Act.
And she wants to expand it.
She wants to expand it. She wants to lower prescription drug costs.
Right, because those are huge burdens for a lot of families.
Absolutely.
And what about education?
Education is another big priority for her.
She talks about making quality education accessible to everyone.
Regardless of zip code, regardless of background.
Early childhood education is a big focus.
Right, because that's where you really lay the foundation.
It's interesting because these are issues that really resonate with voters across the political spectrum.
They do.
Everyone wants affordable health care. Everyone wants good schools for their kids.
Right. It's not a partisan issue.
So why is she still such a polarizing figure?
That's a million-dollar question, isn't it?
It is.
I think it's a combination of factors,
Yeah.
Partly it's the way she's been portrayed in the media.
Right.
There's been a lot of negative coverage.
And it's partly just the nature of our political system.
Right. We're so divided.
Everything's so polarized.
It's hard to find common ground anymore.
So as we kind of wrap up this part of our deep dive, what's the big takeaway about her time as vice president?
I think the takeaway is that she's a complex figure.
Okay.
She's someone who's been both praised and criticized.
Right.
She's a tough negotiator. She's a skilled diplomat. She's a passionate advocate for social justice.
But she's also faced questions about her effectiveness.
Exactly. And I think that's something that voters are going to have to weigh as they make their decision in this election.
All right, so we've covered a lot of ground, but there's still more to explore.
There is.
We need to talk about the bigger picture.
Right.
What does her candidacy say about America?
What are the implications of her potentially becoming president?
Win or lose.
Win or lose.
This is a historic moment,
It is.
and we need to understand what it means.
So stay tuned. We'll be right back.
All right, so we're back, and we've been talking about Kamala Harris and her journey and her policies, but now I want to zoom out a little bit
Yeah.
and think about the bigger picture. Like,
Yeah.
what does her candidacy say about America?
Yeah.
Where we are as a country.
It's a really fascinating question, and I think it goes beyond just, the political horse race.
Right. It's about representation.
It's about who we are as a nation.
What does it mean to have a woman, a black woman, a South Asian American woman running for president?
It's a huge deal.
It's a huge deal. And it's something that, people are going to be talking about for generations.
Absolutely.
But it also raises some really interesting questions like, does her identity automatically make her a champion for certain groups?
Right. And that's a debate that's been happening, within those communities.
Yeah.
Some people say, she's one of us, she's going to fight for us. Other
No.
people say, her record doesn't necessarily reflect that.
Right. Her actions speak louder than words.
Yeah.
And it's like she's being held to this impossible standard.
It's a really tough spot to be in.
She's got to be everything to everyone.
And it's impossible to please everybody.
It's impossible.
Mhm.
And so it makes you wonder, is America really ready for a leader like this?
A leader who embodies this kind of intersectionality.
Right, this
Cool.
blend of identities and experiences.
It's a challenge to our traditional notions of what a leader looks like.
And, whether we're ready or not, it's happening.
It's happening, and it's forcing us to confront some uncomfortable truths about ourselves.
Yeah, about our history, about the way we treat women, particularly women of color.
And it's a reminder that the fight for equality is far from over.
So let's talk about impact. Even if she doesn't win this election,
Right.
what are the ripple effects of her candidacy?
Well, I think one of the biggest impacts is on young people,
Yeah,
particularly young girls and women of color.
seeing someone who looks like them running for president,
That's a powerful message.
that's a powerful message. It says, anything is possible.
It breaks down those barriers.
Oh, right, it expands the boundaries of what's imaginable.
And it's not just about symbolism.
Right.
Her policies, if implemented, could have a real impact on people's lives,
Yeah.
on issues like social justice, climate change, economic inequality.
These are things that affect everyone.
Absolutely.
And so her candidacy represents a potential shift in priorities.
A different way of thinking about what's important.
And that's exciting, even if it's scary for some people.
Change is always scary.
But it's necessary.
It's necessary for progress.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to ask you, what's the key takeaway for our listeners?
The key takeaway is this.
Okay.
Kamala Harris's story is America's story.
Hmm.
It's a story of progress and struggle, of hope and disappointment, of a nation trying to figure out who it is and where it's going.
And her candidacy is a reflection of that.
Absolutely. It's a mirror that we're holding up to ourselves
And it's up to each of us to decide what we see in that mirror.
and what we do about it.
Well said. That's a great note to end on. We've explored the highs and lows, the policies and the controversies,
The good, the bad, and the ugly.
and we hope you've learned something along the way.
We hope it's given you something to think about.
So thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the world of Kamala Harris.
And until next time.
Keep questioning, keep exploring, and keep diving deep.